adventures in imperfect living.
It's kind of like Pavlov's dog. I hear certain things and I immediately feel like I have to go into a certain way of being. I hear the music and I immediately feel like, oh, I know how to talk now. Greetings, folks. Welcome back to the program. My name is Greg Willits from rosaryarmy.com.
And I am Jennifer Willits, his wife.
Have to say thank you right out of the gate for your patience. For these last few months, we've been on a bit of a sabbatical from doing the show. And it's been a challenging 3 months. But thank you for your patience while we have been taking this necessary time, while we have been spending a lot of time in prayer.
Yeah, it's been a journey of discernment and allowing ourselves to be very uncomfortable, forcing ourselves to be, to rest, to listen, and to wrestle. And many times I think we were probably fighting ourselves a little bit, but these are all necessary. And I think you're going to be ultimately very glad that we have put in this kind of time.
And I think, that's a good point. We did put in a lot of time over these last few months. That there weren't any shows that you got to see or listen to, but our constant prayer, it was one of the hardest. It was a very difficult 3 months. I won't lie to you. I got an email the other day from Phil in Indiana. He sent it directly to me. I don't think you saw it. And he said, is there going to be another adventure in Imperfect Living? Are you going to? And we got some other emails like that. And the only thing I could say is we are working on it. It's been a challenging time. And I finally went on a retreat over the summer. And it was my intention to do it at the beginning of the year, and it kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And I think I talked about the need to do this on our last show. There's a new retreat center in the state of Georgia. It's in the Archdiocese of Atlanta on the very far end. Even though we're in the Archdiocese of Atlanta, it took me 2.5 hours to get there. It's called Heritage Retreat Center. And it's a beautiful facility, brand new, just opened up this year. And it really is an amazing place. And when I went, I was actually the only person there for part of the time. Mm-hmm. And so I had, a couple 100 acres all to myself. And I just walked and walked and walked. And literally miles of rosaries and miles of prayer, praying for you, but praying for Rosary Army. And these last several months and all summer long, the prayer was, give us wisdom. Give us wisdom on how we are to do this apostolate, how we do the show, how do we do all these things that we've been doing for so long. And you know how sometimes you do something for so long that either you can fall into a couple of different camps. Everything becomes routine and lacks originality, or you can overcomplicate things to where you become almost paralyzed. And I definitely feel like that's where I've been a little bit. I've almost been paralyzing myself. But I spent a lot of time. There's a beautiful image at the Heritage Retreat Center in the chapel. And it's the image of Mary sitting on a throne and the child Jesus in her lap. And longtime listeners know that we talk a lot in recent years about St. Louis Marie de Montfort's the love of eternal wisdom. And it's something that's just really grown on my heart. And I want to do bigger projects with it, and worked on that this summer as well. But this image is basically, it wasn't labeled as this, but I realized during my prayer on my retreat, this is Mary, the seat of wisdom. What does that mean? And we hear that in litanies to Mary, right? Mary, seat of wisdom, pray for us. She literally is the place where wisdom, Jesus, sat. Now, I don't know if that's the original meaning of it or if that's what it, but to me, I'm like that she is the literal seat of wisdom for the child Jesus. And she is sitting in the chair next to wisdom, Jesus. And so these things were coming to me. And so I really just praying all summer long for wisdom. And so what were we praying for? And what did this have to do with the show? And we're actually going to do another episode about discernment. So let that be a little hint for you right there, right? It's like, so they're going to do another show.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't, they're not just showing up and then saying goodbye and then that's it, they're done. Though I will admit there were thoughts of that over these last few months.
That was part of the struggle when you are facing burnout and you're exhausted, all for good reasons, from producing for 20 years, trying to give our audience the best content that we felt that we could give with our youth behind us. And we just needed to ask ourselves, give permission to ask ourselves, is this what God is still calling us to do? Are we done? Can we be done? Are we going to podcast forever? Is that realistic?
Is there still value in what we're doing?
Yeah. And so those are not easy questions to ask, and they're even harder to answer because you can't help but bring your hurts into the answer. You bring your fleshy selves into that. And we're like, but I need God to answer this question for me.
One thing, and it's been coming to me a lot in just the last few days, to summarize how I've been feeling over this summer, is we took the break in part because we needed some rejuvenation, and I wanted to give my brain some time to hear the Holy Spirit, but also to try to figure out, is this what we're supposed to still be doing? And the images that came to mind was from the movie Forrest Gump, 2 scenes in particular from Forrest Gump. So in Forrest Gump, you have this scene of Forrest just starts running, and the next thing you know, he's running all around the country, and he's running for a long period of time, and then other people start running along with him, and he runs for so long that he eventually has a super long beard and long hair, and then all these people are following him as if he's some sort of Messiah, and then he stops and he turns to them, and they're like, "Oh, he's going to say something. He's going to talk," and all he says is, I think I'm done running now. and that's it. Well, I will just admit that I have felt like maybe I've run this particular race. You mentioned 20 years. We're coming up on 20 years of podcasting. We've been producing this content for 20 years. We've been talking about our family for 20 years. We've been talking about the mission of Rosary Army for 20 years. And the next image from Forrest Gump that came to me is when he was sitting on the bus stop bench, telling the story to the man and the woman that were there, and he's told all these things and all these adventures and all these places that he's gone and all these people he's met, and then now it brought him to that place on that bench, and it's as if his story was over. And then what happened after that? A whole new story began. He found out he had the son, and and so there's this new adventure that goes on that we never get to see. There's a book that no one read called Gump and Son or something like that, but that doesn't matter. Let's pretend there's the adventures that went on that you and no one else knew about. And so, in a way, when we think about this show, Adventures in Imperfect Living, it has been about our adventures in imperfect living and trying to live out our faith in this world while raising kids and raising family and all these other kinds of things. And it's made a lot of sense for many years. But then I start thinking about, but the truth is, I do feel a little bit like Forrest Gump in more ways than one. I may not know a lot, but I know I love my Jenny. No, I never call her Jenny, by the way. No one has ever called her Jenny.
This is true.
But I know I love my Jennifer. But there's commonality here, right? But
wait, am I going to die? No.
The thing though that has come to me in the last few days is thinking about. So Forrest went through a long journey, and you saw that. We've gone through a long journey, and if you've been listening to us for a long time, we have all of these adventures from the last 20 years that are still out there. The Rosary Army podcast is still out there. The stuff that we posted from our radio show is still out there. Other podcasts we've done still out there. All these adventures, all these conversations, we've talked about so many things. In many ways, at the beginning of the summer, I felt like we've told our story. Well, you saw the whole thing. It's all been out there. And I didn't know what other stories I have to share with you because we're at a different point in our lives where our children are older. We have 4 of our 5 kids are now in their 20s. And that changes what we feel comfortable sharing on their behalf in protecting them. And even our daughter, who is a teenager now, as she is getting older, it's more prudent for us to not talk about the family as much. So then what do we talk about? And that was what was raging in my head. And it made me think about, and we were talking about this on the way home from church today, athletes, right? So you look at Mike Tyson. Listen, Mike Tyson today is still a very intimidating man. I would watch a Mike Tyson fight, and I think Mike Tyson would still win. But you know that if you look at Mike Tyson from 20 years ago, anyone who's going to walk into the ring is going down. You know, he was a much more powerful person. And you have to imagine that with age, he has had to, in his training, change his tactics. Tom Brady, not my favorite quarterback. I know we have New England listeners who listen, but I'm an Atlanta Falcon fan, 28-3. I'll never get over it. But I'm still going to use Tom Brady as an example of, so he had to change his tactics. He left the Patriots. He went to Tampa. He changed his tactics. He's left Tampa, and now just a few weeks ago, he did his first commentator, job with one of the games on CBS or one of the channels. I don't know who it was. I didn't watch because it's Tom Brady. But my point is, he had to change his tactics. He still has value. Mike Tyson still has value. They lack the energy and the skill of their younger selves, but that doesn't diminish their value now. It just changes how they bring their value. And that has been a big question for us is, okay, we can't keep doing adventures in imperfect living as it's been. And nor can we ever truly recapture the enthusiasm and the sheer creativity and innovation of ourselves from our early 30s 20 years ago. Jennifer, over the summer, over the sabbatical, turned 54 years old. She's now closer to 55 than she is to 53, which means in a year she's going to be closer to 60 than she is to 50.
That's right. That number is coming, and I can't stop it, but...
Whereas I, at a youthful 53...
Yeah, look at you.
I still have
spring chicken.
I still have like less than 2 months to get my ducks in a row.
But here's what larger takeaways we can all glean from this, because this is just the aging process, and we have to admit we are not as strong as we once were. When we were in our 20s and 30s producing Adventures in Imperfect Living at its height, we had a lot of physicality that we brought into our living. And as part of aging, there is a shift from physical, most often, to more of a mental shift. We have matured. We have to fight with the weapons of our faith in a different way. While there might have been more in the trenches in a physical sense of carrying that toddler who's screaming, in mass, and you're just trying to make it through mass. So that was a very physical way of living out your faith and doing what's right. But when your hair is gray and you're older and you can't bend over as easily as you once could, so now it's a different game. We have to use a different skill set, and we have amassed the skills. That's the benefit of aging, is the maturation that comes from it. And so we are asking ourselves, what is the best way we can serve the mission right now, exactly as we are right now, at our age, with the energy reserves we have right now? What is the absolute best we can do?
And over the years, we've asked various donors and supporters of Rosary Army and listeners, when they think of Rosary Army, what comes to mind? And we've always, not me in particular, always been a little troubled whenever we've heard, and rightfully so. We're not saying it's wrong that people have thought this. We've definitely done things that have made this happen. But people say, well, I see Greg and Jennifer and Rosary Army as one and the same. And we see that, but then that means that the podcast is just as important as the real overall mission of Rosary Army, which is the promotion of the Rosary as a prayer of the life of Jesus Christ and consecration of ourselves to Jesus through his mother Mary, which brings us into a deeper understanding of our Catholic faith, a deeper connection with Jesus, and gives us a clearer path to heaven. That's really what, in these later years, we specifically really have a yearn to focus to that, or to return to that focus. During our break, just a few weeks ago, our daughter has a friend and was spending the night, and her friend's mother came to pick her up. And it was in the morning, and she came into our house, and the girls were still asleep. And so she came in, we offered her a cup of coffee, and I was sitting in a chair in the living room with my laptop open, working on, I wrote so much this summer. So much of it was processing writing, right? It's stuff that will probably never be seen by anyone else. But it was talking to God through writing. It was talking to myself. It was outlining things that we've done and where I want to go. And so I'm just quietly sitting there writing, and she came walking in, and she has 5 children as well, and a lot of them are younger. And she came in, she goes, "It's just so quiet here." And we just had to laugh. It's like, well, we've been through the phase where everything was loud all the time, and this is where we are now. And it was just, I've heard you say many times how our house has become almost like a monastery at times, which is weird for a 15 going on 16-year-old girl to grow up in, our daughter. But that really is, we can see life as empty nesters still doing this apostolate work. And it really is it's a ministry for us in a way that's very scary at times, because we have to completely trust our future as people to God, as well as the future of the apostolate to God. Taking this break over the summer was terrifying to me, because I also know that at the start of Advent, we need to do our giving campaign for Rosary Army. And will people say, well, you didn't podcast for 3 months, and so we're not going to give this year? And I hope that's not the case, but I could see how someone would say that if they equate Rosary Army with Greg and Jennifer and vice versa. If they equate Rosary Army with just the podcast and not this overall mission. The mission from the beginning of Rosary Army, and we stopped saying it in the podcast because the podcast stopped being about Rosary Army. When we originally podcasted for years, until we went to radio, our first 240-something episodes, every episode we ended with, make them,
pray them,
and give them away. Every episode. Make them, pray them, give them away. That's Rosary Army's motto. And that's at the heart of what we do. By making them, it's a tangible thing. We're thinking about Jesus and Mary then, just as we think about the life of Jesus when we pray the rosaries. And then we evangelize and we share the faith when we give it away. We're challenged in our faith when people say, why would I pray a rosary? And then we have to give an answer when we explain that it's a meditation on the life of Jesus, all these things. And just, you are kind of already experiencing some of the rejuvenation of this mission in your own life right now.
Yes. Right now, I am very blessed to work in a small Catholic high school. And so for the first time, I actually am personally feeling compelled to make all twine knotted rosaries for the students that I'm around. I am not the rosary making person in our family. That has always been something that Greg has done. He's been the rosary making guy. Every time we go on a trip, he's making rosaries and giving them away. And for the first time, I felt compelled to do so and to experience that moment of making it and giving it to a student and just watching that touch point happen live, of them receiving a gift, the excitement of receiving it, and then their zeal for I think I want to learn how to make one. Yeah. I want to give one away. And just getting back into that mission again, the motto, and living out the motto was very exciting. And I'm still very excited to continue.
And the motto is simple. And I, as I said, tend to sometimes overcomplicate things. And I want to stop doing that, but I don't know if I can, but I'm going to try.
It's a process.
And as I said, we will be doing a show about, in more depth, about the lessons of discernment that we have learned throughout our lives, but really saw in play over the summer, and share some of the ideas for what we almost did. There were times where we said, let's just scrap everything and start a brand new show. Just start from scratch. Discerned. We had we'll just say another media network wanted to pick up the show. We discerned. Is that what we're supposed to do? Working on other projects, writing projects and that kind of thing. Is this what we're supposed to do? Discern. What we figured out, we narrowed it down from what we can see at this point, as we're talking to you, there are changes ahead. We think rather than trying to get all of the new ideas all combined and then launching at that point, this episode, for example, we are going to wade back into the waters with small and gradual changes and maybe a few big ones. One big one we're about 90% sure is going to happen, and we'll tell you about that here in a second. We're leaning towards three things right now. With School of Mary, which, again, we'll talk about this more. At this point, we're leaning towards this. We've been trying to figure out what other courses, what other things do we do? And Jennifer said one thing over the summer that was an immediate piece of, yes, I think that makes sense, which is if all School of Mary can do is get more people to consecrate themselves to Jesus through Mary, then School of Mary is successful. We kept trying to create other courses we've launched several of them that are excellent, right? Over the summer, we did launch a whole new course on enthroning your home to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. We have one on the devout life. We have another one coming about Marian consecration. We have other things that we were going to do, but we just realized, well, one of the things that we can do is get it into more parishes and more groups and expand that offering of total consecration. So if we just focus on total consecration and let that be School of Mary's focus, so narrowing down the focus rather than trying to make it huge. The other is with some video experiments. We know that some of you like watching the entire episode as a video. We may keep doing that or we may stop the long form. But we do initially plan on continuing to record it as we are right now, and then maybe just releasing parts of it in video, releasing the whole thing as the audio, and shorter episodes. Try to go back to something that's more digestible for you and others, and also something that when people see the number, they don't choke when they see 1 hour or 1 hour and 5 minutes. Try to keep it shorter for you with more of a focus on the Rosary and on the mission of Rosary Army. And so with that, some people scoff at any time we've changed the names of our shows in the past. And so we're not changing it immediately, but it's coming soon, and it'll probably be something that's going to happen leading up to the launch of our giving campaign this year. Again, beginning of Advent. It makes sense to us. We're going to keep this stream. So if you're subscribed, you don't have to do anything. You'll still keep getting this as it is, but the show image will change. In March, it'll be 20 years that we've been podcasting. The original name was the Rosary Army Catholic Podcast. We're changing the name of the show from Adventures in Imperfect Living to the Rosary Army Catholic Podcast. That's what this is. This is not the Greg and Jennifer show. All the other mistakes we've made along the way.
That show is still there.
It's still there.
And you could still listen and access all those adventures. But we're older now. We are literally closer to the eternal at this point. It's time to get serious.
Yeah.
We need to get very serious because our world is downward spiral. I mean, I can't hardly look at the news. So we need to really arm ourselves with Jesus and Mary so that we can make it.
And I think that will allow us to be more inspiring, more helpful to you in your faith life, and to push you in the direction that we think that we all need to be going. And so with more of a focus on the Rosary and the mission of Rosary Army, one of the things that we said is we want to start asking, whatever topic that we come up with, asking the question, what does that have to do with the Rosary? And at least have that in our minds as we are developing shows for you so that there's a purpose behind them. And what this means is it's probably going to see fewer interviews. We know a lot of you really enjoy the interviews, but and we'll talk about the discernment process again in the future.
Later, yeah.
Less family stuff, just out of respect to our children. As they've gotten older, several of them have said, please don't talk about these things on the show anymore. And we just, it's easier just to say, you know what, let's not talk about the kids anymore than it is to say, well, can we talk about that and not that and this and that? But at the core, more Jesus, more Mary, more Rosary. That's what we want to do. And in many ways, this is returning to the excitement of ourselves from 20 years ago when we were just starting to podcast, when Catholic new media was new and fresh even to us. And that's so important to us right now. And we thought that there would be, even bigger changes during the sabbatical. We actually,
that was the door you were knocking on, and it was not opening.
It wasn't.
To you.
And I really did think that something major changes. Mm-hmm. And instead, what we felt Jesus and Mary saying was, we actually want you to go smaller. If your audience never grows, that's okay. Stick to the mission. If you don't get another download past what you've got in the past, stick to the mission. Make them, pray them, give them away.
And I'm often hearing this in my prayer life, my grace is sufficient.
Yeah.
My grace is sufficient. If you have Jesus, you have everything you need. And if you believe, like we believe, our Lord is truly present in the Eucharist, then every time you receive Jesus in the Eucharist, you are in fact receiving all the help you are ever going to need. It's everything.
One of the things that we loved about the early days was sharing your feedback. We used to get so much more email and voicemail. I don't have a voicemail line set up yet, and our email needs to change. But for now, it still is feedback@gregandjennifer.com. If you want to share your ideas with us, we'd love to hear from you. What do you think about what we said? How can you help us to be able to reach this mission of getting the rosary into more hands, of promoting the rosary in this world that desperately needs this prayer? These are the thoughts that we're struggling with, and hopefully you're going to stick around with us as we continue to make the small steps, and we'll let you know when we're actually going to pull the trigger and the name change is going to happen and all those things. We're still in these adventures in imperfect living, but our mission needs to be Rosary Army. So thank you for being with us, and until next time, we can go ahead and start saying it. Make them,
pray them,
and give them away. God bless, folks.